Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a vast ocean, waves crashing against the shore with a force that seems unrelenting. The sky above is darkened, heavy with clouds that promise no light, no relief, only the tempest that rages on. The wind howls, pulling at your very soul, as if the storm itself seeks to consume every ounce of your strength. In such moments, it's easy to feel abandoned, isolated, and utterly lost. Yet is this not the crucible where faith is tested and forged into something unbreakable? Storms are not just a force of nature, they are woven into the very fabric of our lives. They come without warning, dismantling the fragile sense of security we've worked so hard to build. But have you ever considered that storms are not meant to destroy us, but to reveal the resilience hidden deep within? Could it be that these tempests, terrifying and uncontrollable as they are, serve a purpose far greater than we dare to understand? Scripture is rich with imagery of storms, both literal and metaphorical. Noah endured the flood, trusting in God's plan, even when the deluge seemed endless. Jonah faced the storm as a direct consequence of his defiance. Yet even in his rebellion, God provided a way back. The disciples trembled in fear as waves battered their boat, only to witness Jesus command the storm with a word, "Peace, be still." These accounts are not merely stories, they are reminders, echoes of a divine truth. No storm is beyond the reach of God's hand. What if the storm you are facing now is not punishment but preparation? What if the chaos that surrounds you is shaping you for something far greater than the calm you once knew? It is in the storm that we learn to rely not on our own strength but on the infinite power of God. The question is not whether storms will come, they are inevitable, but whether we will trust the one who controls them. Think about the times when life seemed unbearable. Were those not the moments when your prayers became more fervent, your faith more desperate? Adversity has a way of sharpening our spiritual focus, stripping away the distractions and forcing us to confront the core of who we are. Are we merely fair-weather believers, or do we cling to God even when the winds of doubt threaten to tear us apart? Consider this: every storm has an end. The darkest night eventually gives way to dawn, and the fiercest storm will, in time, exhaust its fury. But the question that remains is, who will you be when the storm has passed? Will you emerge bitter, or will you rise stronger, refined by the fire of your trials? The choice is not dictated by the storm itself, but by your response to it. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever wondered why God allows storms in your life? Could it be that He is less concerned with your comfort and more invested in your growth? Comfort rarely produces character, but adversity has a way of chiseling away the unnecessary, leaving behind a masterpiece of faith and resilience. What if the very pain you are enduring is the soil in which God is planting seeds of greatness? The truth is, storms are a part of the divine narrative. They are not random acts of chaos, but chapters in a story written with purpose and intention. To resist them is futile, to embrace them is transformational. But this requires a faith that goes beyond mere words, a faith that sees the unseen, believes the unbelievable, and trusts in the unfailing goodness of God, even when every visible sign seems to point to the contrary. So I ask you, what is the storm in your life revealing to you? Are you allowing it to push you closer to God, or are you letting it drive you into despair? Have you considered that the storm may not be happening to you, but for you? These are not easy questions, but they are essential ones. For it is in wrestling with these questions that we begin to glimpse the profound truth of who God is and who we are called to be. As the winds rage and the waters rise, remember this: storms do not last forever. This storm will pass, just as all storms before it have passed. But what will endure is the faith you build in the midst of it, the character you forge through it, and the God who carries you through every wave and every gust of wind. Let us now turn to the signs that God uses to assure us that the storm is temporary and that brighter days are ahead. 1. Your pain has a purpose. Pain, as unwelcome as it is, often becomes the backdrop for God's greatest work in our lives. From the moment we experience trials, we are tempted to see them as meaningless, random events meant to hurt or punish us. Yet God never allows pain without purpose. He is the master artist, taking the broken pieces of our lives and creating something that far exceeds our understanding. Have you ever considered that your pain might be the very soil from which God is preparing to grow a mighty harvest? Throughout Scripture, we see countless examples of God using pain to achieve His divine plan. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for crimes he didn't commit. For years he endured suffering, likely wondering why God had allowed such affliction. But in the end, his pain had a purpose. Joseph's trials prepared him for leadership, taught him resilience, and positioned him to save his family and an entire nation during famine. Would Joseph have become the man he was without the trials that shaped him? Similarly, consider the Apostle Paul. He speaks openly about a thorn in the flesh, a persistent affliction that tormented him. Though he pleaded with God to remove it, Paul ultimately realized that his weakness was the very place where God's power was most evident. "My grace is sufficient for you," God told him, "for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. What an incredible perspective. Pain became the vessel through which Paul experienced the fullness of God's grace and strength. In your own life, pain may feel like an unjust punishment or an unbearable burden. It's natural to question why God allows us to endure hardship. But what if your current suffering is God's way of preparing you for something greater? Perhaps He is building patience in you, deepening your faith, or refining your character. These are not small matters, they are the very qualities that will equip you to fulfill the purpose for which you were created. Think of gold being refined by fire. The heat, though intense and seemingly destructive, is necessary to remove impurities and reveal the gold's true brilliance. Your pain serves a similar function. It strips away self-reliance, pride, and superficial faith, leaving behind a heart that is wholly dependent on God. This process is not comfortable, but it is transformative. It turns suffering into strength, despair into hope, and weakness into a testimony of God's power. Consider this: could your pain be the answer to someone else's prayer? God often uses our trials not only to shape us but to bless others. Your endurance through suffering can inspire others to hold on to their faith. Your story of overcoming hardship can give someone else the courage to face their own challenges. Just as the trials of biblical figures continue to encourage us today, your faithfulness in the midst of pain can have a ripple effect that impacts lives in ways you may never fully understand. When you are tempted to give up, remember this: God never wastes pain. He uses it to teach, to guide, and to bless. The same God who allowed the storm to rage in your life is the God who will calm it in His time. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and knows every ache of your heart. Trust that He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating something far greater than you could ever imagine. So, as you face your trials, cling to the truth that your pain has a purpose. It is not meaningless. It is God's way of shaping you for the plans He has for you. Hold on to His promises, knowing that He is faithful to complete the good work He has begun in you. 2. You are not alone in the storm. In the darkest moments of life, when the winds of adversity howl and the waves threaten to overwhelm, it is easy to feel abandoned. The isolation of suffering can be one of its most agonizing aspects, as we convince ourselves that no one understands our pain or hears our cries. But the truth is far different. You are not alone. God is with you, even in the midst of your storm. The Bible repeatedly reassures us of God's presence in times of trouble. One of the most comforting passages is found in Psalm 23:4. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff. They comfort me." Notice the psalmist doesn't say that God removes the valley or the shadow. Instead, he promises His presence as we walk through it. God's companionship is not about removing every hardship, but about sustaining us through it. Consider the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When they were thrown into the fiery furnace for refusing to bow to an idol, it must have seemed like the end. Yet in the midst of the fire, there was a fourth figure, God himself, walking with them. The flames did not consume them because God's presence was their shield. This story is a powerful reminder that God does not always deliver us from the fire, but he walks with us through it. In your storm, it may feel as though God is distant or silent, but his silence is not his absence. He is closer than you realize, guiding you through the chaos and offering strength that you cannot find within yourself. Have you ever noticed that the times when you felt most abandoned were also the times when you grew the most spiritually? That is the paradox of God's presence. He may seem hidden, but his work in your life is most evident during your weakest moments. Jesus himself promised, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28:20. This promise is not conditional, it is a steadfast assurance that no matter what you face, God is by your side. His presence is not something you earn, it is a gift of his grace. Whether you feel it or not, he is there, holding you up when you are too weak to stand on your own. One of the greatest weapons the enemy uses against us is the lie that we are alone. He whispers that our struggles are unique, that no one cares, and that even God has forgotten us. But the truth is, God's love is relentless. He pursues us in our pain, surrounds us in our fear, and lifts us when we fall. You are never beyond his reach, never out of his sight, and never without his care. Take comfort in knowing that the God who created the universe is intimately involved in your life. He knows the number of hairs on your head, the depth of your sorrow, and the weight of your burdens. And he promises to be with you through it all. Lean into his presence. Seek him in prayer and trust that he is working all things for your good. As you weather the storm, remind yourself that you are not alone. The one who commands the wind and the waves is with you, and he will see you safely through. Let his presence be your anchor, your shelter, and your strength. 3. God's timing is perfect. In our moments of despair, it is human to ask, why now? Why this? Why me? The storms of life often feel ill-timed, striking when we least expect or desire them. Yet, what if the timing of your trials is not an accident but part of a grander divine plan? God's timing, though it often eludes our understanding, is always perfect. His plans are never rushed, and they are never delayed. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:1, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven." This verse is a reminder that life's events, both the joyful and the painful, occur according to God's schedule, not ours. Just as a seed must be planted, grow, and mature before it bears fruit, so too must we endure seasons of preparation before we can experience the fullness of God's blessings. Consider the story of Lazarus. When Jesus received word that his beloved friend was gravely ill, he did not rush to his side. Instead, he delayed, allowing Lazarus to die and be buried for 4 days. To the human mind, this delay seemed cruel and unnecessary, but Jesus had a purpose that no one could foresee. By waiting, he revealed his power to bring life out of death, demonstrating a miracle that glorified God far beyond what healing Lazarus would have achieved. His timing, though perplexing, was perfect. In your own life, the storms you face may seem endless and the waiting unbearable. You may wonder why God hasn't intervened, why the breakthrough hasn't come. But remember, God is never in a hurry, and he is never late. His timing takes into account every detail: your growth, your readiness, and the impact on those around you. What you perceive as a delay may actually be God's preparation for something far greater than you have imagined. Waiting on God's timing requires trust and surrender. It demands that we let go of our need for control and place our faith in his infinite wisdom. Psalm 27:14 encourages us, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart." This waiting is not passive, it is an active trust in God's promises, a declaration that his ways are higher than ours. During this season of waiting, God is working behind the scenes. He is aligning circumstances, preparing opportunities, and molding you into the person you need to be to receive what he has planned. Have you ever considered that the delay in your storm's end might be because God is perfecting something in you? Perhaps He is teaching you patience, deepening your faith, or positioning you for a purpose you cannot yet see. Reflect on the seasons in nature. Winter may seem cold and barren, but beneath the surface, life is stirring. Roots grow deeper, preparing for the bloom of spring. Similarly, your season of waiting is not wasted. It is a time of hidden growth, where God is strengthening your spiritual roots so you can withstand future challenges. Trust in God's timing. Even when it feels like the storm will never end, He knows exactly when to calm the waves and bring you into a new season. Hold on to His promise in Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. The storm may seem endless, but God's perfect timing ensures that it will pass at exactly the right moment. 4. Faith unlocks divine intervention. Faith is more than belief. It is the key that opens the door to God's miraculous power in your life. In the midst of life's storms, faith becomes a lifeline, connecting you to the one who commands the winds and the waves. Without faith, the storm feels insurmountable, but with it you invite the intervention of the Almighty. The Bible is filled with accounts of how faith unleashed divine power. One of the most compelling examples is the story of the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 long years she suffered, seeking healing from every earthly source, but finding none. When she heard of Jesus, her faith stirred her to action. She pushed through the crowd, believing that if she could only touch the hem of His garment, she would be healed. Her faith moved Jesus, and in that instant she was made whole. Jesus said to her, "Your faith has made you well." Mark 5:34. It wasn't her touch that healed her, but the faith behind it. Similarly, consider Peter walking on water. When Jesus called him out of the boat, Peter stepped onto the waves, sustained not by his own ability but by his faith in Jesus. Yet the moment his focus shifted to the storm around him, doubt crept in and he began to sink. This story illustrates the power of faith to defy the impossible and the consequences of letting fear and doubt take its place. In your own life, storms may tempt you to abandon faith and give in to despair. The enemy would have you believe that your situation is beyond help, that God has forgotten you. But faith defies these lies. It declares, even when I cannot see the way, I trust that God is making one. Faith is not about denying the reality of your storm. It is about acknowledging the greater reality of God's power over it. Jesus Himself emphasized the power of faith, saying, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Matthew 17:20. This verse reminds us that faith does not need to be grand or perfect. It simply needs to be present. Even a small measure of faith can unlock the extraordinary. Faith also invites peace into the chaos. When you trust in God's sovereignty, you can rest in the assurance that He is in control. This peace surpasses understanding, guarding your heart and mind even as the storm rages around you. Faith transforms fear into courage and uncertainty into confidence. How then do we cultivate such faith? Faith grows through hearing God's word, through prayer, and through recalling His past faithfulness. Reflect on the times when God has carried you through previous storms. Remember His promises, and let them be the anchor for your soul. As you nurture your faith, you create an atmosphere where God's power can move freely. In the end, faith is not just a tool for survival, it is the very means by which we thrive. It is the bridge between human limitation and divine possibility. When you choose faith in the storm, you unleash the intervention of a God who is mighty to save. Trust Him, and watch as He turns the impossible into a testimony of His glory. 5. God's promises are unchanging. In the storms of life, it can feel as though everything is shifting beneath our feet. What once seemed secure becomes uncertain, and we find ourselves grasping for stability. In these moments of turmoil, there is one unshakable foundation we can rely on: God's promises. They are not just words, they are eternal truths that transcend time and circumstance. God's promises are unchanging, and they serve as an anchor for our souls when the waves threaten to carry us away. Throughout the Bible, we see God making promises to his people and keeping them without fail. When he told Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, it must have seemed impossible. Abraham was old, his wife Sarah was barren, and the fulfillment of the promise seemed out of reach. Yet, God's word did not return void. At the appointed time, Sarah bore a son, Isaac, and through him, God's promise was fulfilled. This story reminds us that God's timing may not align with ours, but his promises are sure. In the book of Isaiah, God says, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." Isaiah 55:11. This assurance is a lifeline for those navigating life's storms. When you feel overwhelmed, remember that God's promises are not contingent on your circumstances. They are rooted in his character, faithful, unchanging, and steadfast. One of the most comforting promises is found in Deuteronomy 31:8. "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. This promise is a reminder that no matter how fierce the storm, you are never alone. God is with you, guiding you, protecting you, and providing for you. Yet trusting in God's promises requires faith. It requires us to believe that what he has said is true, even when our circumstances suggest otherwise. Consider the disciples in the boat with Jesus during the storm. Though Jesus had promised that they would reach the other side, their fear overtook them as the waves rose. But Jesus rebuked the storm and calmed the sea, proving that his promises hold power over even the mightiest tempests. In your own life, the promises of God are your greatest weapon against fear and doubt. When the enemy whispers lies that you are forgotten, cling to his promise. "I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." Isaiah 49:16. When you feel weary and burdened, remember his invitation. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. These promises are not abstract, they are personal, spoken directly to you. God's promises also remind us of the ultimate victory that awaits us. The storm you are facing now is temporary, but his promise of eternal life is everlasting. Revelation 21:4 declares, "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." This is the promise that sustains us through life's darkest moments. As you weather the storm, let God's promises be your refuge. Speak them over your life, meditate on them, and let them strengthen your heart. They are the unchanging truths that will guide you to the other side of the storm, where his faithfulness will be fully revealed. 6. The storm is temporary, but your faith is eternal. When you're in the middle of a storm, it's easy to feel like it will last forever. The winds seem endless, the waves relentless, and the darkness unyielding. Yet every storm has a beginning and an end. No matter how fierce, it is temporary. What remains eternal is your faith, the foundation that will carry you through not only this storm, but every challenge you face in life. The Bible reminds us time and again of the fleeting nature of trials. In 2 Corinthians 4:17, Paul writes, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." Notice the contrast. Troubles are momentary, but the glory they produce is eternal. This is a powerful truth that shifts our perspective. When we focus on eternity, the storm loses its power to overwhelm us. Consider the story of Job. He endured unimaginable suffering, losing his wealth, his children, and his health. For Job, the storm must have felt eternal. Yet his faith remained steadfast. He declared, "Though he slay me, Yet will I hope in him, Job 13:15. In the end, Job's faith was rewarded. God restored him, blessing him with more than he had lost. Job's story reminds us that storms are not the end, they are a pathway to restoration and growth. Faith is not just a tool for enduring the storm, it is the treasure you carry through it. Storms test and refine your faith, burning away doubt and fear until only what is true remains. Like gold purified in fire, your faith becomes stronger and more resilient through adversity. James 1:2-3 encourages us to consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. In the temporary nature of storms, there is a hidden blessing. They teach us to depend on God, to lean into His strength, and to trust His plan. Each storm becomes a chapter in the story of your faith, a story that testifies to God's power and goodness. When you look back on past trials, you'll see how they shaped you, how they drew you closer to God, and how they prepared you for greater things. Faith also gives you the endurance to stand firm, even when the storm is at its fiercest. Hebrews 11 is filled with accounts of individuals who endured incredible trials by faith: Noah, Abraham, Moses, and countless others. Their storms were temporary, but their faith left a legacy that inspires us today. As you face your storm, remind yourself that it is temporary. It will pass, but the lessons it teaches and the faith it builds will last forever. The storm is not meant to destroy you, but to prepare you for the blessings God has in store. Trust that He is with you, guiding you through the waves, and that on the other side, you will emerge stronger, wiser, and more steadfast in your faith. 7. Your breakthrough will inspire others. Life's challenges often feel like solitary battles, moments where the weight of the world presses heavily on your shoulders. Yet, there is an unspoken truth about storms. They are not only about you. Your trials, and more importantly, your triumphs, hold the power to inspire and transform others. When you persevere through the fiercest storms and emerge victorious, your story becomes a testament to faith, resilience, and the unyielding love of God. This breakthrough, born out of pain and perseverance, has the potential to impact lives far beyond your own. The Bible provides countless examples of how individual breakthroughs inspired nations, families, and even future generations. Consider the story of Joseph. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Joseph's life seemed to be one storm after another, but his faith remained steadfast, and in time, God elevated him to a position of power in Egypt. His breakthrough not only saved a nation from famine, but also reconciled his broken family. Joseph's story continues to inspire believers today, demonstrating how faith in adversity can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Your story holds the same potential. When you share how God carried you through your storm, you provide hope to those who feel lost in their own struggles. In a world where so many are searching for light in the darkness, your testimony becomes a beacon that reminds them of God's faithfulness. People may see your success, your joy, or your peace, but when they hear the story behind it, how you faced trials, leaned on God, and overcame, they are inspired to trust Him with their own battles. Think of how powerful it is when someone says, "I thought I was the only one going through this." Your breakthrough has the power to break the chains of isolation that storms often bring. Many people feel alone in their pain, convinced that no one understands their struggles. By sharing your journey, you remind them that they are not alone, that others have faced similar storms and emerged stronger. This connection can reignite hope in those who are on the verge of giving up. Your testimony also serves as a living example of God's grace and power. It's one thing to read about miracles in the Bible, but it's another to witness them in the life of someone you know or can relate to. Your story of overcoming becomes a modern-day illustration of God's promises in action. It reassures others that the same God who worked wonders in biblical times is still working miracles today. As Psalm 66:16 says, "Come and hear, all you who fear God. Let me tell you what He has done for me." Moreover, your breakthrough can inspire others to deepen their faith. When people see how God moved in your life, they are encouraged to seek Him in their own. They may begin to pray with greater sincerity, trust Him with greater confidence, and lean on His promises with greater conviction. Your story becomes a catalyst for spiritual growth, not just in your life but in the lives of others. However, sharing your breakthrough isn't always easy. It requires vulnerability and courage. It means being honest about your struggles, your doubts, and even your failures. But it is precisely this honesty that makes your story relatable and impactful. People don't need to hear about perfection, they need to hear about perseverance. They need to know that you doubted, cried, and even stumbled, but that God was faithful through it all. Consider the ripple effect of sharing your testimony. When one person is inspired by your story, they may find the courage to face their own storm. They in turn may inspire someone else, creating a chain reaction of hope and faith. Your breakthrough becomes more than a personal victory, it becomes a tool God uses to reach others. This ripple effect can extend far beyond what you see, touching lives you may never meet. Your story also serves as a reminder of the importance of community. Storms often isolate us, making us feel as though we must face them alone. But when you share your breakthrough, you invite others into your journey. You show them the value of leaning on God and on each other. Your testimony can encourage others to seek out support, whether through prayer, fellowship, or simply reaching out to someone who will listen. It's important to recognize that your breakthrough is not the end of the story. It is a stepping stone to the next chapter in your faith journey. Every storm you overcome prepares you for the storms ahead and equips you to help others weather theirs. Your testimony is a living, evolving story that continues to grow as God works in your life. And don't underestimate the legacy your story can leave. Just as we are inspired by the faith of biblical figures, your journey can inspire future generations. When you share how God moved in your life, you leave behind a testimony that can encourage your children, your grandchildren, and countless others. Your story becomes a thread in the larger tapestry of faith, connecting past, present, and future believers in the shared hope of God's promises. Your breakthrough is not just about overcoming, it is about glorifying God and pointing others to Him. It is about reminding the world that no storm is too great, no battle too fierce, and no darkness too deep for the light of God's love to overcome. So when the storm passes and you find yourself on the other side, don't keep your victory to yourself. Share it boldly, knowing that your testimony has the power to inspire, transform, and glorify. As you reflect on your breakthrough, remember these words from Revelation 12:11. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Your story, your victory, and your faith are tools God uses to bring hope and healing to a world in need. Be courageous in sharing your journey and trust that God will use it to touch lives in ways you may never fully see or understand. Your breakthrough is also a testament to God's timing and wisdom. When others hear how He moved in your life, they are reminded that their own delays and struggles are not without meaning. Your story becomes a living example of how God's plans are higher than our own. Sometimes people need the reassurance that while they wait, God is actively working behind the scenes to bring their breakthrough to fruition. Your testimony can instill in them the patience and trust to endure their own waiting season. Your breakthrough may inspire others to dream bigger and trust God for greater things. When they see how He brought you through the impossible, it can ignite their faith to step into situations that once seemed insurmountable. Your story challenges others to expand their vision, to believe in miracles, and to expect God to show up in their lives as He did in yours. Even more, your breakthrough can reveal to others the beauty of surrendering their battles to God. Many struggle because they try to face their storms with their own strength. When you share how letting go and trusting God led to your victory, you give others the courage to do the same, showing them the freedom and peace that come with placing their burdens at His feet. As you share your journey, remember that God's glory shines brightest through our moments of weakness and triumph. Your story is not just about overcoming, it's about magnifying the one who brought you through. It's about using your life as a testimony to the unchanging faithfulness of God, giving others hope that their storms will also pass. So be bold in sharing. Your words may be the very lifeline someone else needs to find faith, hope, and strength to endure their own storm. As we journey through life's storms, let us never lose sight of the truth that no matter how fierce the winds or how high the waves, God is always with us. Your pain has a purpose, your faith invites His power, and His promises remain unshaken. Every storm you face is temporary, but the lessons it teaches and the faith it builds are eternal. Trust in His perfect timing, knowing that He is crafting a story of redemption and triumph for your life. And when your breakthrough comes, and it will come, remember to share it, for your testimony could be the light that guides someone else out of their own darkness. These storms are not the end of your story. They are the chapters that shape you, refine you, and draw you closer to the one who holds all things in His hands. So hold fast to your faith, for it is the anchor that will keep you steady until the skies clear and the calm returns. Thank you for joining us today. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need this encouragement. And remember, every storm has its end. Keep your faith strong and let God guide you to brighter days. Until next time, stay faithful, stay hopeful, and never forget that the one who calms the seas is walking with you through every storm. See you in the next video.